Okay. So I did a video yesterday about the Smoky Lake Corsair. Something came up today. My father-in-law has a Mason evaporator. I'm not overly familiar with him. His is the first one I've ever seen. But he's like, hey, I've never run a Flue pan before. Can you come over and kind of, look at it and make sure everything's going all right? I guess one time he had the levels really deep with the sap, and so I said, all right, yeah, I'll come over. And so I went over, and I was like, boy, something smells kind of burnt. You get that, if you've been boiling syrup long enough, you know that burnt smell. And so I walked in, and he's like, well, I had a little boil over on my front pan, and so with this one, it would have been, it came over here, but that didn't look burnt. Maybe it's just the evaporator, and his sugar shack's a lot different than mine, and so we were sitting there, and pretty soon I was like, I'm gonna look in his hood. He's got a hood on his back pan, and I looked in there, and sure enough, the tops of it was burnt, and he was having some problems with his float box on, I think it was on that side, and I don't know if his supply line is big enough to keep up with the evaporation or not. But what I want, for those of you that don't know, if you have a Flue pan and it says run 1.5 inches deep or 2 inches deep, that does not mean 2 inches in the bottom of the pan. That means 2 inches over the top of the flues. So I'm going to bring you around here real quick just so you can kind of see what the flues look like. Okay, so those are the flues. Mine are about 7 inches deep. I'm not sure what my father-in-law's are. They're probably pretty close to that. And so up here, you can see again. So here's my sap level. So you can see how deep it's almost right up here. So I'm running about 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep on my back pan, on my Flue pan. That is where you want it. If you don't run it that deep, the tops of these are going to get burned. And that's what happened to him, is the top of his pan, and I mean, it got crispy. Stuff was starting to flake off, and thankfully it was just on the top, because he did have some in the bottom. I didn't hear it sizzle. I've heard my back pan sizzle before. That's a scary, scary sound when you hear that on a really expensive pan. And that was one where I had ice in my tank, and I didn't realize that it wasn't letting flow out. So for the newbies out there that have never ran a Flue pan, when it says 2 inches, it means 2 inches above the flue. If you don't do that, you're going to ruin your pan real fast, and you're going to be out a lot of money, because those are not cheap. So keep that in mind when you're boiling. Your back pan's kind of like your warming pan, but you can get it to a pretty good roll and boil. I think you guys seen the video on mine. That thing's always, it's just boiling. It's bubbling. When you open the hood up, you got to be careful, because that thing can sometimes shoot, hot little bubbles out, and it'll burn you. So wear glasses, stuff like that. But I thought I'd take this time just to go over that, because that's something I didn't know. And the only reason I didn't know that going into buying the pan, I didn't know how a Flue pan worked. And so thankfully I was able to sit down with Jim at Smoky Lake and say, okay, I'm a beginner on this kind of stuff. Baby steps, break it down for me, Barney style, as we used to say in the Marine Corps. Just work me up, let me know what I need to do, how I need to be doing it. And so that was when I talked in my first video about him taking 1.5 hours with us. That was it. It was just going through every little play-by-play. Unfortunately, my father-in-law didn't have that, or at least he didn't have it in person. And so that's why he asked me to come over, since I've actually have a Flue pan. I've been using it for a couple years. I'm a little better versed than most people. So, it's still learning. I think it's a learning process no matter how long you've been doing it, how old you are. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert, but I do have some experience, and some is bad. So, but out of bad comes experience and lessons that I can pass on to somebody else, so that hopefully they don't have the same issue, which is hopefully you. So, hope this helps you out. Happy boiling.